You're listening to We Deepen Media.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Deepen with Christina. What you are about to listen to is a continuation of my conversation with Jack Hunter Cohen, a conscious life coach and also creator of the Witness Circle, a transformative online group program. Although I do recommend you listen to part 1 of this episode, just listening to part 2 will give you insights into Jack's work and also expand your mind about what it means to love and what it might be like to write a relationship contract. Now, please enjoy part 2 of my conversation with Jack Hunter Cohen.
Yeah. And you and me will all keep discovering new things as we go along. Because when you talk about love, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about love and what it is and what it isn't. I think mostly what we're sold on as love is some very bright, sort of like, very cheerful, wooey, warm and fuzzy feeling. But mostly love is like, it's a fucking blood sport. When you love someone, that's the most courageous thing you can do. When you really love someone, not some idea of it, but when you really love someone and you open your heart to someone, it's like, you're going to go on a hell of a ride. And it's like, and it takes a lot of guts and it takes a lot of skill and it takes a lot of vulnerability to really survive that and to thrive in that. So, I mean, a lot of the people that a lot of us think we love, we don't. That's not really love. It's like, where did you learn how to love? Who taught you how to love? Think about that. What were your models for love? Were they good models or were they terrible models? I don't know about you, but I had some pretty terrible models. And it took me a long time to just like sort of untangle that. And it's taken a lot of years and a lot of practice, and it's still something I wrestle with. But it's fascinating because I love deeper now than I've ever loved ever before. And it's amazing. It's amazing to be able to feel with another person, just like you're just loving this person and there's nothing attached to it. They don't need to be any way they don't want to be. It's like when you can look at another person and say, I'm going to love you no matter what. And as much as you can receive it, I'm going to give you. And if you can't receive it, that's okay too. I'll put it somewhere else. I won't be offended. But this is where I want to put my energy because this is the only thing that really matters. That's the thing that's going to heal us. It's not all the fear and it's not all the intellectualizing and the trying to figure stuff out. This is just like the witness circle for me is just like a really cool route to get to that. It's just one other way to get to that part, that spot. And it's hard because, and you brought up Tantra Speed Date, which I'm very fortunate enough to run in LA. And what I tell people at the end, we go through these stations and people connect with each other really deeply. And it's very moving for a lot of the people that come in. And at the end, I tell them, my hope for you, my wish for you is that you take all of this that you got here and bring it out in the world, because if you don't, nobody will. If we don't do it, nobody else will. And it's not safe. It's like it takes a lot of courage. So that's my spiel on love.
I love that you've brought love up because this is one of my favorite topics to discuss. There's a piece of me right now that wants to say, okay, let's push start on the podcast now because we've just begun. Love, yes, is underneath of why I do everything that I do. And the one, I think the what drives this strange career as founder of We Deepen and Feminine Weapon and the work that I do in the world is all around me, growing up in a household that, I was confused. I had a father who at 17 sat me on the steps as my parents were divorcing to tell me that he didn't love my mom anymore. And it was so confusing because I'm like, wait, how do you not love her? I get you're getting a divorce, but like, I love you. You both created me and you don't love each other. Like this is, and years later, this is now 23 years outside of their divorce, and I still find myself asking my dad questions about it at times. And most recently he said, yes, I do still, I think maybe I picked at it so often that I got him to admit that he does still love my mom right now until this moment and this day. Mm-hmm. But it sent me on this life journey to understand what is love, how to give love, how to feel love, and also the difference of love and relationship. Mm-hmm. And is love attention? Like what, I can meet somebody and feel love for them in the moment that I've met them. I mean, I could go on for this topic for some time, because even then too, it's like you're in a new romantic relationship and then you withhold saying the words, I love you, because it means something else. And, or we put more weight on it at times.
Well, we all have different associations to it. And for all of us, it's like that word has a lot of meaning to it, but it doesn't have the same meaning for, probably any two people. It's like everybody has a very specific sort of mostly unconscious idea of what love is. So, we don't really think about it. And because of that, because so much is ill-defined in our relationships, we don't have contracts. We should have contracts where we say, this is what we want. This is what we like. This is what we don't like. This is what I'm willing to, it's a BDSM contract. Basically, this is what I'm a yes to. It's like the same concept, and it keeps it clean, and it keeps the communication open. If you're willing to say what you want and what you don't want, that's a huge thing. And that clarifies things so that you're only doing this. You're not doing that, you're doing this. And you can change your mind, but for the purposes of this time, this is what we're doing. And everything is a conversation, everything is a discussion. And it never ends. It's not, you never get to a point where we're there. We're set. We don't have to think about this anymore. You're constantly working it. It never stops until we're dead. It doesn't stop.
Have you done a relationship contract before?
Have
you done a relationship contract?
I've not done a relationship contract within a relationship, but I've done a lot of work in the BDSM realm, where I've had contracts with people, I've had, containers, but not anything, a relationship, a long-term relationship. But that's where I am now. And that's the realm I'm playing in now. I'm not monogamous. I play with different people, and we have different agreements, and it's clean, and it makes a lot of sense. And extending that to relationship would be a piece of cake. It would really be an easy thing to do. Yeah.
And when do you think would be a good time for a new couple or people within the dating space to bring in this idea of creating a relationship contract?
Well, I imagine it depends on how what you want in a relationship. If you have an agreement about what are we doing here, is this casual? Is this something we want to explore as, maybe lifetime partnership? I think all of those things play into it. But as far as the timing goes, I think if you, do it pretty much right away, put up front what you're looking for, that will circumvent issues that can happen fairly quickly. Because, we tend to get attracted to people for whatever reason, unconscious reasons. Because you look at someone and you have no idea why you're attracted to this person necessarily. They may be in your preferences, whatever, but that's how you come together. But that's just surface. It's not really, there's not anything necessarily deeper there. There may be something magnetic pulling you toward each other that you're not conscious of, but you don't know what that is until you've actually said, this is what I'm looking for at this point. And the beauty of doing that is you can always change it. Once you've named it, you can always you can always negotiate. You can always say, I'm feeling like I'd like to do this now. And in relationships, especially if you go slowly enough, if you have patience, you have enough space so that everyone feels safe within that bubble. It's not going so fast, and you're not trying to grasp onto something and hold on to something that feels good at the expense of, something else, another part of yourself. You're not having to compromise, because compromise just doesn't feel very good. You don't want to have to do that. You want to be able to meet somebody and be in alignment with where you're at and what you're a yes to and what you're a no to, and be open to discussing it.
What would you say to somebody who heard the word contract and feels that contract sounds so locked in, doesn't feel free?
Yeah, it's actually very freeing if you think about it. Because it's like the masculine holds the frame, holds the container, holds the space. And within that, the feminine can do whatever she wants. But you've got this form. So she can feel safe enough. That element can feel safe enough to let go and surrender into it, because she knows she's being held. The contract is basically the same thing. It's a masculine expression, but the container is both masculine and feminine. And that way, you ask for whatever you want. It's such a tricky thing because we're not taught to do that. And most, we'll just say, for the sake of simplicity, we'll call women the feminine, or, have to be a certain way in order to just survive. They will only show so much. They're taught to withhold, because there's power in that, Mm-hmm. When you don't have that, when that conditioning is no longer driving you, if you have the courage and you have a contract within which you can play with someone else, you don't need to necessarily worry about that. It's not going to be easy, because it's a lot of conditioning that's gone into it. And that's the challenge. But you can have a lot more. You can have a lot more of what you want. And again, it's practice. And it's not going to happen. You're not going to knock it out of the park right away. There's always going to be challenges.
I appreciate that this conversation has gotten on the topic of relationship contracts, because this is something that's personally been on my mind, and I have been thinking a lot about. And particularly from a personal experience, I, am in a new connection, and he had mentioned something early on around relationship contract, and my ears perked up, and I was like, oh, this sounds like a nice idea, because 15 years ago, in what for me was my most significant relationship, and I was 25 when that started. It was before any of this work in the relationship space. It was before I'd ever heard of Esther Perel. And I felt myself falling in love with this person. We had been in relationship or seeing each other for 6 months, and I had known him the year prior, but I had now felt this level of vulnerability within the connection, because I was now in love, and I got scared. And so to not withhold from him and to continue deepening, I went back and I wrote a contract. And it was really playful. I think it said sex every, third word on the bulletproof list of the things that were incorporated into this quote unquote agreement. And then I sent it off to him, had him sign it, fax it back to me. And then we continued on. We had a 4 or 5 year relationship. Neither of us, though, at that time, again, when we did go through our problems, because I was his first girlfriend ever, this wasn't a time period that therapy was a big thing, so when we went down, and that was that. Now, fast forward to 15 years later, and this idea of creating a relationship contract is actually really interesting to me. But the process then of doing it together. Now, one thing that I will admit is I'm really well studied in the area of relationships at this point in my life, like 7 years. Now, for the most part, I'm not necessarily seeing men who are as studied as I am. And I've even seen over the past few years, like one of my best girlfriends, I would send her books on relationships before, and she was like, oh no, this seems too, I just want it to happen naturally. Like, I don't want to overstudy. Then I'll be overanalyzing in my connections with other people. Now, fast forward to 2 years later, she's like, give me all the books. She's studying everything. She's trying to, more deeply understand it. So sometimes this idea can also be like, well, are you overcomplicating everything?
Right. Well, as your girlfriend discovered, it's like, you actually need to like look at this stuff, because it's like, it's confronting, Christina. That's the issue. It's like, people don't want to confront stuff that's going to get uncomfortable, but it's going to get uncomfortable one way or another. You might as well face it head on and look at the things that you're resistant to.
Yes.
That's where the work comes in. That's where the real brave bit about, relationships and love comes in. It's like being willing to have the conversations.
Yeah. So I want to pull up so I'm a part of this group, the Esther Perel discussion group.
Okay.
And I had posted about this idea of relationship contract just the other day. And I'm curious around what your thoughts would be on this. So as I was just like exploring what are some topics that I'd want to include in a relationship contract, and I love your feedback on it. So I had written sex, intimacy, communication, conversation, conflict navigation, location, geography, household responsibility, extended family, with some subtopics of how often do you want to hang out with your family? How often do you want me to hang out with your family? How often, just around that topic of how much attention on the extended family, created family, having children. Oftentimes I heard Alison Armstrong talk about, when you have this topic of like, yeah, we'll have children, and then you get married and someone can't birth the children. They're like, let's adopt. And the other's, I'm not into adopting. I don't want to adopt. And the other says, well, you said you would have children. These are things that would be good to discuss. Money, and within money, there's so many subcategories in money. There's debt, there's personal financial understanding. There's willingness to share. There's the level of importance it is for one person or the other, the desired income, your history with money. I think that's really important to share potentially with a partner. What's your money story? What's your history around money? Purpose, growth, addiction, the idea of leading and following, of giving and receiving, love languages, rituals, shared experiences, monogamy, non-monogamy. Around monogamy and non-monogamy, there's also like, monogamy is split into multiple different categories around sexuality, so socially, emotionally, structurally. What's the timing of the progression of the relationship? What's your dreams? What's his dreams? What causes do you support? I mean, there's so much within this list. This was just a brainstorm.
Just listening to you list those things is kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
It almost feels like it's micromanaging. I think the first thing you want to do is just like make sure you're on the same page, just energetically with this person, and then slowly take it from there. I wouldn't blast anyone with that. Like
yes.
One shot, that could be really intense.
Totally.
I was facilitating a call that was predominantly women, and I was holding space for them to just talk, and each one of them had their space to say whatever was coming up for them. And I had to slow them down because they were talking so fast, because they had this time, and all of a sudden all this stuff unexpressed that was backed up in their system came coming out like a tsunami, and there was just no way you could follow it, and it would kind of knock you out even trying to keep up with it. So I just had everybody take a deep breath and slow down and just assure them, and like, look, we got you. We will hold you here. Just say whatever you need to say, and you don't have to hold anything back. Just going to slow down so we can feel you. And then when that happened, it opened up the floodgates, and you actually started feeling, and stuff started like coming out and processing in a healthy way, in a way that, had them feel held and seen. So that's what that reminded me of, because it's a lot of this. It's like, how do I make this relationship as safe as I possibly can? That's what it sounds like. It's like, it ain't gonna be safe. No matter how much you try to nail every single thing down, it ain't gonna be safe, because the one thing you didn't think of is gonna come up, and it's gonna knock you on the head. So what I would say is just like cut it down, and just like forget about all the subcategories. Just get the categories. Money's a good thing to talk about for sure. Your rules around money. If you can have that conversation, and the conversation around sex and monogamy or polyamory, those are probably the biggest things. And intimacy. What is intimacy? Mm-hmm. Is intimacy, having a 1-hour phone conversation with another woman, or is it having sex with another woman? Because those are two different kinds of intimacy, and some of them are more threatening. The conversation may be more threatening than sex.
Yeah, totally. And that was, that is essentially my personal brainstorm that I shared with you. And I also even realize, because I've noticed after I did that, I haven't had a really desire to actually bring this up or to even share this with this person. It's almost on my own individual self query. Mm-hmm. However, I am seeing the benefit of a couple actually doing that activity together, and wondering, where do you begin?
I think just logistically, I would have each of you do it separately, and then come together, and then just compare it. That's
actually pretty good. Yeah. So essentially, no one is conditioning the other person with.
You're just saying, say what your desires are, say what you like, and just and lay it all out there, and being willing to have a yes or a no. In other words, you're not imposing it. You're just simply stating what your desires are. And, the idea ultimately is to have you connect, is to have you feel connected.
Can you speak a little to what is in these BDSM contracts?
Oh, goodness. That's a whole nother can of worms. But if you imagine, BDSM is you set up scenes, and you have each of the partners fill out a contract saying, not a contract, but a preference and consent form, stating what they're a yes to, and if they're a yes to it, how much of a yes they are to, between 1 and 5. And then I know as the Dom that this is a yes for this woman, and that if there's anything specifically that I want, I can state that as well. But mostly what I do as the dominant in the relationship is I look at what the desire is, and feel into what this woman wants, what the submissive wants, and do my best to give her that in the context of the scene, so that I have a clear picture of, what her desires are. And it's a very liberating thing, because she can say anything. She can say whatever level of, nudity, whatever level of pain, whatever level of this or that. I mean, out of context, it probably sounds really odd in the context of this conversation. I'm just naming that. But there's, bondage. There's textured objects. There's all sorts of things. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. What I really held on to was this space where another person speaks their desires.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's even something that we withhold from ourselves. And in withholding from ourselves, we withhold that from those around us.
Sure.
And then it comes out in really funny ways.
Yeah, well, suppressed desires do come out sideways, because they're still there, and they still want to be met. And it's not a conscious thing. So if you're not conscious of those things and you don't express them, then they will come out sideways. And there are other ways of dealing with those too. I mean, one of the cool practices is existential kink. If you've not heard of that, Carolyn Elliott's thing, which is where you just look at the things in yourself that you that are appearing in your life that you don't want, and you just love them. You just give them all the attention, because the theory is that whatever you have in your life, you want, no matter how it appears to you. You obviously want this thing, or you wouldn't have it. So you give that part of yourself that wants that thing all the attention that it wants, so it doesn't have to actually play itself out. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of dealing with the things that you don't want in an effective way. We're going all over the place in this conversation.
We are.
All these things are kind of like they're tools, and you get to know them as you progress, as you play in these fields, and they're all useful in their own ways.
Yeah. So I know your work, it sounds as though you are very studied and aware around polarities and masculine and feminine energy. How does that play into into where and where this particular question is coming from, of being a kind of looking around and what are the teachings happening around relationships. There is a Facebook group around polarities, and they're very much of like the masculine, the man is the leader and the woman is the follower. So he is setting the container and she is believing in him and trusting him and just continuing to let him lead. So then her desires, as though she's, how does, within the communication of a story, how does a woman share her desires?
I think consent. I think being clear about what her desires are. So I don't think it's kind of misleading to say that it's, men are the masculine and the women are the feminine and they're surrendered and the man is dominant, because that's not the case. We all have masculine and feminine in ourselves. We all have dominance. We all have the desire to submit. We all have all of that. Just men primarily are dominant because that's what we are. It's not that's not negotiable. Women have more of a feminine energy, generally speaking, although it's not always the case, and they have a desire to submit. What we've gotten to in the world is where the roles have just gotten so completely like twisted around and confused, because there's a lot of, there's just a lot of variety out there. There are, there's LGBTQ, there's a lot of different ways of expressing yourself, all of which are great. And it's caused a lot of confusion because we're still trying to figure out like hack this thing where so men can be this and women can be that, and we oversimplify it. It's not that simple. Mm-hmm. The thing that will make it easier is communicating and being clear and not being tied to be this particular role with every single person you know. Because it's like I'm different with everyone that I play with. All of the women that I play with within this realm are very different women. And I play with them all differently. I don't treat them all like the same woman. That would be ridiculous, and that would be insulting, and that wouldn't be me actually seeing them. Mm. So in that way, it's like you tell me as best what you want, and I will tell you if I can give you that, or I will do my best to give you that thing. And that's it. It's not a complicated thing. We're not getting married. I'm not necessarily taking you to dinner. We're not doing anything beyond this. We're just doing this. And if something grows out of that, there's always that possibility, but that's not what we're doing here. We're having a very simple connection, but it's connected. And we can, like, for this short period of time, we can just give it all up. We can just be completely expressed. We can just bring all of our hearts. We can bring everything to it. And that, for me, is the most healing and the most exquisite, and just it's like the best relationship you could possibly have, because there's none of the other stuff getting in the way of it. There's none of the other chatter, the other, what if this doesn't work out? What if I don't get this? It's like, but that's me. That's a specifically like non-monogamous way of being in the world, which works for me. So I think it probably would work for a lot more people. It would make more sense, and people would be a lot happier. But that's what I've come to at this point.
Yeah. Thank you for allowing my psyche to explore many different topics and ideas throughout this podcast. That is what Deepen with Christina. It's like you go into the journey, and what is coming forefront to my consciousness is just what comes out, and then a conversation unfolds around that. So I really appreciate you diving in and not knowing even where the conversation would lead.
Yeah.
Now, before we end today, I would love to know from you, what is it that you desire for the world or humanity as a whole?
Oh, goodness. I just want people to be happy. I want people to have the richest life they can have in the moment, and not look toward the future to have something that they want right now. And want them to be fully expressed, and want people to feel seen and heard, and be willing to be seen and heard. And so I think that, and just have an awareness that we are all connected, and that, we could all be gone tomorrow. We have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. So, enjoy yourself today, and, and let's try and stay here for, as long as we can, and take care of one another, be kind, because it's like, if there are whatever inequities there are outside, they are in us as well. Whatever we suppress, that we project onto other people, it's stuff in ourselves that we've not looked at, that we've suppressed. And don't judge, because who are we to judge others? And take care of yourself. And it's a big game. and there are a lot of different, shades to it. There are shitty people out there, and, you need to be aware of that and not put your attention on it, but not ignore it, but not put your attention on it. Put your attention on the things that you can do that will serve other people. A woman I interviewed for my film years ago, I asked her a similar question, and she closed with something to the effect of, service and love are the only thing that really have any meaning in my life. Service and love and compassion. It's service for other people. And she said, I think that's why we're being brought to the very edge of the abyss, to bring the human collective to its knees, to begin to ask, for God's sake, what? That was 30 years ago.
I just have to ask one more question, because it's something that I find myself asking. I recently asked my father, who retired about 6 months ago after a 50-year career, and he's in this other stage of life, and our family is aiming to support him in that. And I asked the question, like, Dad, well, you're 68. What's your goal? How long do you want to live till? No answer. I can't get an answer. And I've been asking people around, what's your goal? Like, how long do you want to live? And there's a lot of ambiguity in that, like, I'm here until God wants me to go, I'll go. I'm here for whatever. And there's a little resistance that I notice I have around that ambiguous answer. Because of course you never know. But like, I also, you said to be here as long as we can.
Well, what I meant was us as a species, as a race, not necessarily us personally.
As a person to person.
But I think, that is a very confronting question. When you ask someone to deal with their mortality and say, I want to be here for another 10 years, or I want to be here as long as my brain is intact, as long as I can recognize the people around me, as long as I'm not a burden, that's a big one. As long as I'm physically healthy, as long as I'm sharp, as long as I have a purpose here.
I like those answers.
Yeah, I think for me, that's the best I could come up with, because I don't want to think about not being here. I do all the time. I think it's a really good practice to think about your death every day, so that you don't take anything for granted, and you just, you recognize that we do have a limited time here. But yeah, it's asking somebody that question. That's a big question to ask people. It's, that is a very deep question, Christina.
On that note, so a witness circle, I know you're doing them a few times a year, and there's 4 people per circle, although that may increase. Who is the right person for the witness circle?
I think anybody who has done some work, who's a little stuck, who wants to have some practice, just being more themselves, who wants to bring more of themselves out. I think people who have a story that they're holding on to that is not serving them, who wants to come to a place where they can get rid of that story, I think that would be a really good person to be doing this. I think anyone can get benefit from this, from showing up and from being in this container, because we all have stories. And even if we don't have a specific story ourselves, when we hear other people's stories, there will be resonance in them, and that will help. Hearing other people's stories helps. Connecting with other people on a deeper level helps. Being intimate helps. Having a space where you're not having to think twice about what you say, what you share, feeling like you are seen. All of those things are helpful. And people's systems move, things open up for people as a result of coming through this process. So I think Anybody who resonates with what we've been talking about today will probably enjoy it. But the circle is fairly simple and it's fairly specific. It's just, come here and connect with other people without the artifice of being separate from other people. Come here as like part of the human race, and these are other parts of you that showed up here, not by accident, but specifically here to share this space with you for whatever reason we don't know. And there's some information here for you if you choose to see it. And I think that's the best answer I can come up with.
I'm definitely inspired by what you're doing in the world and the uniqueness of this experience. I love how it's a small container of just 4 people, and that anybody around the world can tune in to have this experience. So thank you for what you're doing. I look forward to sharing that on We Deepen and supporting the circle and getting it to more people. If somebody wants to go and find you, where's the best social media or places to go?
I'm on Facebook, a little bit on Instagram, but mostly they should just go to jackhuntercohen.net and they can read about me there. They can find out everything they need to know about me there, more than they want to know. And they can schedule an appointment to have a conversation and to see if it's something that they would like to do. And then we can go from there. And there's no pressure, there's no obligation, but it's just that's probably the best way of engaging with me right now. And I am on Facebook, so they can see me there as well.
Cool. You have such a fun job to get to sit and have all these interesting conversations.
Well, thank you. I built it that way. And, it keeps me interested and it keeps me engaged.
Thank you so much for having this conversation and for being a guest on Deepen with Christina. For everybody who's listening, if you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, follow, like, share it with a friend, and definitely make sure to go check out the calendar at wedeepen.com, see all of the upcoming experiences. We will definitely share about the Witness Circle with you as well. And until next time, enjoy. Bye for now.